I was standing in our kitchen, the kind of ultra-modern setup you'd see in a magazine. Marble countertops gleaming under the recessed lights, all sharp edges and cold perfection. The air stank, though, like someone had torched a landfill. It was the smell of molten plastic, acrid and thick, curling up from the pile of ashes in front of me. That had been my passport. A blue booklet, crisp and official, now just a charred lump, edges crumbling like dry leaves. My hands trembled as I stared at it, the heat still radiating off the mess, thin wisps of smoke snaking toward the ceiling. I couldn't breathe right. My chest was tight like someone had their foot on it. Sophie was sitting 5 feet away, perched on a bar stool, calm as hell. She was sipping a green smoothie through a glass straw, her perfectly manicured nails, blood red, glossy, swiping across her phone screen. She didn't even look up. Not when the ashes scattered as I shoved the counter. Not when I opened my mouth and let it rip, my voice low and jagged. You didn't need him. Stay home with the kids. That's what poor people do. It was a gut punch and I meant it to sting. She froze for half a second, her lips twitching into a smug little smile, but her eyes stayed glued to that damn screen. Like I wasn't even there. She was leaving the next day. Flying to Crete with Ethan, her lover. She thought I was too buried in work to notice the late-night texts, the girls' nights out, that didn't add up, the way she'd been primping for the grocery store like it was a runway. I'd seen it all. The perfume she dabbed on her wrists when she was just running errands. The new lingerie I found in the laundry, black lace, tags still on, that I sure as hell didn't buy her. I'd known for months, deep down, but this? Burning my passport? That was her spitting in my face. The kitchen was silent except for the hum of the fridge and the faint slurp of her smoothie. My pulse was hammering in my ears, loud enough to drown out the kids playing upstairs, Lila's laugh, Max's toy cars crashing. They didn't know their mom was about to jet off with some sleaze she'd met at her yoga class. I could still see her then, twirling her hair the week before, telling me, "Oh, Ethan's just a friend. He gets me." Got her. Right. Got her out of her clothes, more like. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. The sting kept me sharp. She thought she had it all figured out, me slaving away at the startup, nose to the grindstone, oblivious. She didn't know I'd sold it. 12 years of my life, poured into code and coffee and sleepless nights, cashed out 2 days earlier for $3 billion. $3 billion. I hadn't told a soul, not even her. It was supposed to be the big reveal. Whisk her off to a villa in Portugal, white walls and ocean views, a fresh start for us and the kids. I'd pictured her face lighting up, that old spark coming back. Instead, I was standing there, choking on burnt plastic, watching her smirk. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her smile widened, just a flicker, but I caught it. My stomach twisted. That was him, wasn't it? Ethan. Probably texting her about the flight, the hotel, the bed they'd share while I was here picking up the pieces. I wanted to grab that phone and smash it against the marble, watch it shatter like my trust. But I didn't. I just stood there, the silence between us stretching tight, a wire ready to snap. "You're really doing this?" I said, my voice rough like I'd been yelling for hours. She finally looked up, her green eyes cool and steady, like she was sizing up a stranger. "Doing what?" she said, all innocent, tilting her head. The lie was so smooth it was almost art. "Almost. Crete," I said. "With him." Her face didn't change, but her fingers tightened around the glass. "Bullseye." She opened her mouth, probably to gaslight me again, but I cut her off. "Don't. Just don't." I stepped closer, the ashes crunching under my shoe, and leaned in until I could smell the kale on her breath. "You think I'm blind? You think I didn't see you?" She laughed. A short, sharp bark that hit me like a slap. "You saw what you wanted to see, Nick. Always did." Then she slid off the stool, smooth as silk, and brushed past me, her shoulder grazing mine. The contact burned. I heard her heels click on the hardwood as she headed for the stairs, leaving me with the ashes and the stink and the kids' distant giggles. I wasn't done though. She didn't know what I had up my sleeve. $3 billion changed the game. I was going to give her the world, now I was going to take it back. I turned to the counter, grabbed a dish rag and started wiping up the mess, slow and deliberate. The smoke was clearing but my head wasn't. I had a move to make and she wasn't going to see it coming. I was hunched over the kitchen counter when the house went quiet, the kids' giggles fading into soft snores upstairs. The ashes of my passport still clung to my fingers, gritty and warm as I scrubbed them off in the sink. The clock hit midnight and something snapped in me, sharp like a wire breaking. No more standing still. I bolted to the closet, yanked out an old leather duffel and started throwing shit in, wrinkled shirts, my laptop, a toothbrush. My hands moved fast, mechanical, like I'd rehearsed this 100 times. Maybe I had, in my head. In my office the air was thick with dust and the faint tang of ink. I spun the dial on the safe. Sophie never cracked the combo, not once, and pulled out stacks of cash, crisp hundreds banded tight, plus a folder of documents and a spare key fob. It was for the black SUV I'd bought a month back, parked in a garage she didn't know about. Another secret. I smirked, picturing her face when she'd realize I wasn't the sucker she thought. Back in the kitchen, I scribbled a note on a napkin and dropped it next to the ashes. "You're right. I'm staying home. Have a good trip." She'd eat that up, think I'd rolled over. Good. I peeled out in the SUV, the engine growling low, and drove to a penthouse I'd bought through a shell company years ago. Cash, off the books, overlooking the city like a king's perch. The skyline glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows, all sharp lights and shadows, while I paced the hardwood, adrenaline buzzing in my veins. "First call, Lena, my lawyer." "Freeze the joint accounts," I told her, voice steady. "All of them." She didn't ask why, just said, "Done by morning." Next up, Mia, Ethan's fiancée. I tracked her down weeks ago, gut telling me she'd be useful. We met at a coffee shop, the kind with steamed milk hissing and mugs clinking. She slid into the booth, her face pale as chalk when I showed her a photo. Ethan and Sophie at the airport, arms tangled, grinning like they'd already won. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't crack. Instead, she slid a USB across the table. "Texts," she said, her voice ice. "They're planning to bleed you dry." I plugged it into my laptop later, the penthouse air cool against my sweat-slicked neck. There it was, Sophie's words in black and white. "He's too busy being a daddy, he won't notice till it's gone." Another, "We'll take the money, ditch the kids, live like royalty." My stomach churned, but my hands stayed steady. Then I pulled up the home security footage. Camera Sophie didn't know I'd upgraded. There she was, in grainy color, holding my passport with tongs over the stove, laughing as it curled and blackened. She even waved at the lens, mocking me, her lips twisted in that smug grin. My blood boiled, but I grinned back at the screen. She had no idea. This wasn't just reaction. I'd been ready. The SUV, the safe, the shell company, pieces I'd laid out years ago, like I'd smelled her bullshit coming. And Mia? She wasn't just a victim, she was in. Her eyes had burned when she handed me that USB, her voice low. "Make them pay." The footage, the texts, the frozen accounts, they were my ammo now. Sophie thought she was flying off to paradise, but I was already 3 steps ahead, setting traps she'd never see. I was scrolling through my camera app when Sophie's plane touched down from Crete, the penthouse dark except for the blue glow of my phone screen. The whiskey in my hand burned my throat, sharp and smoky, as I watched her roll up to the house in a cab, her pink suitcase bumping over the curb. She looked smug as hell, strutting up the walkway in those white sandals, her sundress fluttering like she owned the world. I leaned closer to the screen, the ice clinking in my glass, and waited. She punched the door code, once, twice, 3 times, her fingers stabbing the keypad harder each go. Nothing. Her shoulders stiffened, and I caught the faintest, "What the hell?" as she slammed her palm against the frame. My lips twitched. "Welcome home, babe." She dug into her purse, fished out her card, and swiped it at the lock's backup reader. Denied. She tried another card. Same deal. The camera mic picked up her growl, low and feral, as she checked her suitcase at the door. It bounced off, spilling lacy crap onto the porch, and she kicked off her shoes, hurling them next. One hit the lens, a blurry thud, before skittering down the steps. I laughed, the sound rough in the quiet penthouse, the city lights winking outside like they were in on it. She pounded the door again, screaming now, her voice cracking. Then her foot slipped, too much rage, too little balance, and she tumbled down the stairs, landing in a heap. The camera zoomed in, her hands covered her face, shoulders shaking. Was she crying? Good. Meanwhile my phone buzzed. Lena. She hired a cheap lawyer, her text read. Some strip mall hack. It's not gonna work. I grinned, swirling the whiskey. Sophie thought she could claw her way back, but she didn't know the accounts were ice, the prenup was iron, and I'd already won. I flipped back to the camera app. She was on her knees now, clawing through her suitcase, hair a mess, mascara streaking. The house was empty inside. I'd had movers clear it out while she was sipping cocktails with Ethan. Furniture, photos, the kids' toys, all gone. She'd find nothing but echoes if she ever got in. Then my other screen lit up. Nora's article had dropped. No title, just a brutal takedown. Man-stealing influencer sinks her claws into another life. It was everywhere. Twitter, Insta, those gossip blogs Sophie lived for. I'd slipped Nora the tip weeks ago, a quiet email with just enough juice to hook her. Dates, photos, that anonymous letter from Sophie's ex-bestie Tara. She called you her cash cow, it said, and I could still hear Tara's voice, bitter and clipped, when she'd handed it over. Now the internet was chewing Sophie up. Her followers, those 500,000 suckers, were whispering. Is this her? She's done. Brands went radio silent. Her DMs were probably a ghost town. I sipped my drink, the burn settling deep. Her perfect little empire was crumbling and I'd lit the match. The camera caught her staggering to her feet, phone pressed to her ear. Ethan maybe, or that shitty lawyer. Her voice was a garbled mess, but I didn't care. I rewound the feed, watched her fall again in slow motion, the thud of her body on concrete loud in my headphones. My chest tightened, not with pity but something colder, sharper. Victory. She'd built her life on likes and lies and I'd just yanked the rug out. The prenup she'd laughed at when we signed it, oh Nick, like I'd ever need that, was her noose now. She got nothing. No house, no cash, no kids. I made sure of that. I leaned back in the leather chair, the penthouse air cool against my skin, and pulled up Nora's article. Comments were pouring in. Karma's a bitch. She deserves it. My phone buzzed again. Mia this time. Check her Insta, she texted. I did. Sophie had posted a shaky story from the porch. Technical difficulties, fam. Be back soon. Her smile was forced, eyes glassy. The replies were savage. Busted, huh? Where's your man now? I snorted. She was drowning and I was the one holding the lifeline she'd never reach. But then my screen flashed. A new email from an unknown address. I opened it and my gut dropped. A grainy photo loaded. Me outside the coffee shop with Mia, her handing me the USB. Underneath, one line. I know what you're doing, Nick. Careful. My breath caught, the whiskey glass sweaty in my hand. Sophie was down, but someone else was watching. Someone who knew too much. I was halfway through a greasy burger at Dino's Diner when Sophie slid into the booth across from me, the vinyl squeaking under her weight. The air smelled of burnt coffee and fryer oil, thick and heavy, and the neon sign outside buzzed like a dying fly. She looked like hell. Nails chipped and peeling, no makeup, her hair a frizzy mess pulled back with a cheap clip. Her eyes darted to my plate, then up to my face, and she forced a smile, thin and shaky. Nick, she said, her voice soft, syrupy, think of the kids. They need us together. My jaw tightened. I wiped ketchup off my fingers, slow and deliberate, and stared at her. The woman who'd torched my passport was begging now? Bullshit. I didn't say a word, just reached into my jacket, pulled out the prenup, and slapped it on the table. The paper was yellowed, edges curling from years in the safe, but the ink was sharp. Her signature, scrawled with a laugh back when she thought I'd never make it big. You won't get a cent, I said, my voice flat, cutting through the diner's hum, forks clinking, a waitress yelling an order. Her smile vanished. Her eyes glistened, not with tears but rage, and she leaned in, nails digging into the tabletop. I'll sue, she hissed. I'll drag you through hell. I smirked, took a sip of my Coke. The ice clinked, cold against my lips, and stood up. Try it, I said, tossing a 20 on the table. Her mouth opened, but I was already gone, the bell above the door jangling as I stepped into the night. The air hit me, crisp and clean, washing away her stale perfume. She thought she could claw me back, but I was done playing her game. That same afternoon, I launched the foundation, $7 million for kids' education and tech, named after my mom. Sophie used to call her unstylish, rolling her eyes at her thrift store sweaters. Now Mom's name was on a plaque and I felt her quiet strength in my bones. I stood in the penthouse later, the city sprawling below, all glass and steel glinting in the sun. My phone buzzed. Lena again. Foundation's live. Press loves it. I grinned, the leather chair creaking as I sank into it. Sophie's chaos was her problem now. The next day I took the kids to the park. The air smelled of cut grass and sunscreen, and their laughter bounced off the trees. Lila chasing Max, her pigtails flying, him clutching a melting chocolate cone. I handed them each an ice cream, the sticky drip on my fingers warm from the sun, and watched them run. They didn't ask about her. Not once. My chest loosened like I'd been holding my breath for years. Later I called up Leo and Eli. Old buddy Sophie had iced out, saying they were beneath us once the money rolled in. We met at a dive bar, the kind with peanut shells on the floor and beer so cold it numbed your throat. Leo clapped my shoulder, his grip firm. Good to have you back, man. Eli raised his glass, the foam sloshing. To freedom. We drank, and the weight of her lifted a little more. Back at the diner, I'd seen it in her eyes. She didn't get it. She thought I'd cave like always because she'd owned me once. I remembered how she used to curl up next to me back when I was just a dreamer with a laptop, whispering she loved my fire. Now all I saw was greed, a hollow shell clawing at what she'd lost. The prenup wasn't just a shield, it was her own damn trap, signed in her arrogance. She'd mocked it, and now it left her with nothing. I wasn't just surviving her anymore, I was building something real. That night, I sat on the penthouse balcony, the wind whipping past, carrying the faint hum of traffic below. The kids were asleep inside, sprawled on the couch with a half-watched movie flickering. My phone sat quiet, no more threats from her, no more games. I'd cut her out, rebuilt my life. The foundation, my boys, my crew. Freedom tasted sharp, like the whiskey I'd downed after she fell apart. I'd planned this, not just escape but a whole new start, long before she ever lit that match. Then my phone lit up, a text from an unknown number. My pulse kicked up as I opened it. Nice foundation, Nick. But I've got the kids' nanny cam footage. Sophie wasn't alone in this. My grip tightened, the glass railing cold under my hand. The city lights blurred as my mind raced. Someone else was in the shadows, and they had proof. I was standing on a stage in Barcelona, the spotlight hot on my face, when the crowd's roar hit me like a wave. The air smelled of polished wood and sweat, the auditorium packed, hundreds of eyes locked on me, their applause thundering off the high ceilings. I gripped the mic, my voice steady as I unveiled True, my new platform. Truth. Openness. Strength, I said, and the words felt like they'd been carved into me over the past year. Behind me, a massive screen flashed the logo, bold, clean, unapologetic. This wasn't just a tech launch. This was me, rebuilt from the ashes Sophie left behind. She was a ghost now, a faint echo in the rearview, and I was flying. A year had passed since she torched my passport, since I'd watched her crumble on that porch through a grainy camera feed. Her empire of likes and lies? Dead. She'd tried clawing back online, some pathetic, "I'm back fam" post, but her followers shredded her. Fraud. Gold digger. The comments were brutal, and I'd heard through Mia she was living in a rented studio, hawking discount codes that didn't sell. I didn't gloat. Didn't need to. She'd thought she'd gutted me, but she'd lit the fuse for this, true star. A platform that cut through the bullshit she'd thrived on, built to connect real people, real stories. Every line of code was a middle finger to her world. After the speech, reporters swarmed, their pens scratching, cameras clicking like gunfire. "Nick, what about Sophie? Rumors say she's broke, you're doing?" one shouted. I flashed a half smile, the kind that said everything and nothing, and leaned into the mic. "I'm here to talk about True." Next question. The room laughed, and I stepped off stage, the adrenaline buzzing in my veins. Later I flew to Porto. Me, the kids, Leo and Eli. The plane hummed, the kids giggling over a card game in their seats, and I stared out at the clouds, my new passport crisp in my pocket. Sophie had burned the old me. Now I soared. Porto hit me with salt air and sunshine, the cobblestone streets alive with chatter and the clink of espresso cups. We parked at a cafe overlooking the Douro River, the water glinting gold in the afternoon light. Lila and Max tore into their ice creams, vanilla dripping down their chins, their laughs loud and free. Leo, sunburned and grinning, hollered across the table, "To Nick, the bastard who made it." Eli raised his beer, the foam sloshing, and I clinked my glass against his. The foundation was thriving, 7 million already changing lives, and these guys, my old crew, were back in my orbit. Sophie had hated their rough edges, their loyalty. Now they were my anchor. Then there was Ava. I'd met her at a gallery opening in Lisbon a month back, tall, with paint-streaked hands and eyes that cut through you. She was an artist, all fire and no filter, and when I told her about True, she didn't nod and smile. She argued. Sounds noble, but can it last in this mess of a world? She'd said, her voice sharp over the clatter of wine glasses. I like that. No flattery, just truth. We'd been texting since, nothing heavy, just sparks. That day in Porto, she showed up unannounced, sketchbook under her arm, her hair wild from the wind. Heard you were here, she said, sliding into a chair. Max offered her a sticky spoon and she took it, grinning. My chest warmed, not need, not yet, but possibility. Sophie had wanted me broken, a cash cow she could milk dry. Instead, she'd pushed me to this. True wasn't just a project. It was my fight, my answer to her fakery. Standing on that stage, I'd felt it. I didn't need her, didn't need anyone to fill me up. I was whole. The kids were happy, their voices bouncing off the cafe walls as they begged for another scoop. Leo and Eli ribbed me about Ava, her laugh cutting through their noise. The foundation grew, honoring Mom's quiet grit. And Ava? She was a question mark, not a fix. Someone who'd challenge me, not chain me. Later, I walked to the river's edge alone, the sun dipping low, painting the water orange and pink. The air was cool, tangy with salt, and I pulled out my phone. No mystery text this time, just a news alert. Sophie's latest venture flops. She's done, fans say. I smirked, then shut it off. She'd burned my past, but I'd built a future. Not revenge, rebirth. I tossed a pebble into the river, the ripples spreading wide, and turned back to the table, the kids' laughter pulling me home.